Hello everyone, this is Reza Dorani. Today's video is focused around data validations in Power Apps. We will cover various validation scenarios including required field validations, conditionally validating data cards, date validations, pattern matching validations, and much more. So let's get started with the video, but first, my introduction. So let's begin with data validations in a form control in Power Apps. In this scenario, I have a very simple form control in my Power App, the data for which is coming from a SharePoint list. I have leveraged the Microsoft Lists template called Asset Manager to generate this list. It's a list of assets that I can maintain, and it comes with a wide variety of column types. I have made certain changes to the list schema. Title here is a mandatory field. The purchase price, which is of type currency, I have made it a mandatory field in my data source itself. Back to the Power App, we have a gallery that is showing me all the assets that are currently available in the Asset Manager list. For each asset, we have the title, which is the tag associated with the asset that I'm defining right here. And I have the other metadata highlighted right here in the gallery template. Create a new record in my Asset Manager list. Now, in this case, because I've created this form control from that SharePoint list, which is Asset Manager, I have two mandatory fields, which is title and purchase price. And as you can see, both of them have this asterisk symbol next to them. If I try and submit my data right now, it will tell me that an entry is required or has an invalid value. Now, this is the standard message that you get based on required field validations based on fields that you have identified as required in your data source. Now let's see how we can add additional validations to this existing form control. Now, if we look at, for example, the asset type column right here, by default, this as part of the data source is not identified as a required field. However, if I head over to the Advanced tab by selecting the entire data card for asset type, I have the option of searching for a property called required. And by default, when you add a form control, all the data cards are locked. And they are locked since all the properties are dependent upon the column type defined in the data source. In this case, the required column is locked and it is false. If I want to make changes to this, I have to unlock the card and then I can make a change to it right here. So I can say that yes, this is a required field as well. Now bear in mind, this is not a required field in my backend SharePoint list, but I have made it required right here in the form control itself. That means in the form control, I can add additional layers of validations or restrictions that are not defined in my backend data source. So I can make it more restrictive, but I cannot make it least restrictive. If I go to the title data card, and let's say I unlock this card as well, and head over to the required property and set this as false, title acts like it is not required. However, if I try and submit the form right now, notice that it pops up that title is actually a required field. That is because title is required in my backend data source. So even though I went ahead and turned it off, wherein this is not required, it is still enforcing what the data source is enforcing. So let's go back and change title to be a required field again. Now the next step is, how do I add required field validations conditionally? That means depending upon something that's taken place in the form, I would like a certain data card to have a required field validation. So let's take a very simple use case here. If the purchase price is above, let's say, $250, so anything above $250, business justification would be a required field. Now, as you can see, this card is locked, so I would have to first unlock this. And if I head over to the required property for this data card, it is false by default. I need to make this required only if the purchase price is greater than or equal to 250. So how do I do that? If I select the control within this data card, this is the text control. So I'm just going to copy the name of this text control. I'll head back to the required property for business justification and set this as if the data card value dot text. Now I know that it's going to be a number because it's purchase price. So what I can do right here is typecast this with value right? So value of the text that's coming from purchase price, if this is greater than or equal to 250. Now, if I go ahead and play this app, and let's say I change the purchase price to 250, you will note that the moment I do that, business justification becomes a required field. And the moment the number goes below 250, business justification now is not a required field. So you can conditionally make fields required based upon your scenarios. Now let's pick the serial number column right here. Now, if I look at the backend data source, serial number is a single line of text column. It's a simple text field, so the user is free to enter any text of their choice. However, what I would like to do right here is I would like to put a validation that says if the user enters a serial number, the serial number can only be numeric, and at the same time, it must be 9 digits. So how do we go about doing something like that? Now, typically what I observe is we add additional labels, we add some calculations, we add some logic, and we show the error message if that condition is met. And then we even go ahead and disable the submit button by trying to add that similar logic there so the user cannot submit until that validation is met. However, when you do things like that, you are adding additional controls to your Power Apps form. Please bear in mind that the form control itself, the data cards, each card has 5 controls. It has the main card, and then it has 4 additional controls that it comes with. One is the label text. The data card value is where the user can interact with that card. Error message shows up if there is any error associated with that card. And then star visible basically shows up if the field is a required field. So anytime you add a card, you're going to get these 4 controls, plus you get the card, of course, in which these controls are baked into. So 5 controls per card. And if you keep adding additional labels, additional controls, you are adding more controls to your Power App. And you need to be mindful that there are certain performance considerations as well. The recommendation from Microsoft is not to go beyond 500 controls in your Power App. We have the error message label already in place. Why not leverage that existing label to add our own validations into that label? So how do we go about doing that? So here's my serial number card. Of course, if I want to make any change, I need to unlock this card. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock this card. And this card has an error message label. Now, by default, the error message label, the text property is set to parent.error. That means if there's any error that comes in from the backend data source, let's say this is a required field, there's an error, it's going to show up right here. There's a function called coalesce. And what coalesce does is it basically picks up the first non-blank argument that you provide to it. And when you're displaying error messages, you never want to display 5 or 6 error messages associated with one control. You would like to go in order, right? Let's say serial number is mandatory, so make sure you fill it. If the number is not 9 characters, we need to display a message. If it contains alphabets, we need to display an error message. So we can define that order right here in the coalesce function. So the first one is, of course, parent.error, comma. Now I can add my own validation logic right here. Now, what I would like to do in my case is the serial number has to be, the user can only enter numbers. Now, if I select this text input control, I'm going to copy the name of this text input control, go back to my text function for my error message label. Now, I want to check for a pattern here. The pattern is that it has to be numeric. In Power Apps, there's a very useful function called IsMatch. And this is the official documentation on docs.microsoft.com. Highly recommend you to check this out. Any sort of pattern matching that you would like to incorporate, you can leverage the isMatch function. And what isMatch function does is it goes ahead and matches a pattern that you define associated with the text that you provide to it. And not just that, it comes in with a lot of predefined patterns that you can leverage. And all of these patterns are backed by regular expressions. It comes with so many useful regular expression patterns that you can leverage directly in your apps. So in my case, I only need the user to enter numbers. Basically, I want the user to enter multiple digits. So as you can see, there is a predefined pattern for this called multiple digits. So I'm going to go ahead and leverage this pattern which matches one or more digits. So let's go back to the Power App, and right here, I need to show a message if an error occurs. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use not of IsMatch. That means it is not matching the pattern that I'm defining. So IsMatch is the function. It's asking me for the text. Text is nothing but that data card, which is my serial number data card, which is my text control. And now it's asking me for the format. And this comes with all those predefined formats that was there in the Microsoft documentation itself. And one of the predefined formats is multiple digits. I'm just going to leverage this. If the text does not match the pattern that I have defined, in that case, I would like to show an error message, only numbers are allowed. So I formatted my function right here. So now let's go ahead and play this app. If I start plugging in values here, so let's say I just put in one number, the message went away. Now I can keep adding additional digits. As long as I'm entering numbers, it's good. The moment I enter any special character, I enter any alphabet, immediately it's going to throw me that error message saying that only numbers are allowed. Now, even if it is empty, it's still showing only numbers are allowed. So how do I handle that case? All I have to do in this case is just add an additional check right here. And that check is whether or not that same text control should not be blank. That means if the text control is not blank and it does not match this pattern, only then go ahead and show this message. So if I now play the app, I won't see that message because serial number is empty right now or blank. And the moment I start plugging in any values in there, if they are not numbers, it's going to throw that error message for me. Another thing is, if I was to go ahead and submit this right now, notice that wherever there are errors, it's put this red border around it. I want that same behavior right here for the serial number case as well. If I select the control and if I head over to border color, you will note that the formula says if is blank parent.error, put the standard border color, otherwise make it red. So how do I change this so it reflects the changes that I made to the error message label? Well, all you have to do is go ahead and copy the control name for the label. In my case, it's error message 6. I go back to my text control, and for the border color, it says if is blank parent.error, just replace this with the error message.text. That's it. If I play this right now, notice it's put the red border around it that only numbers are allowed. And the moment I enter correct data, the border will vanish. Let's say I would like to add another validation that the serial number has to be 9 digits. So I want to add a second validation to this. The way I can do that is exactly the same. I'm going to go back to my error message. I already have the coalesce function defined. So here's my first conditional check. Now all I have to do is add my second conditional check right here. Add a comma and then add your next condition. And this is what my next condition looks like. So I'm checking to see that if the card is not blank and there's a function called length which gives me the length of the text that I provide to it, and if the length is not equal to 9, then I would like to show an error message that says it must be 9 digits. So let's go ahead and play this right now. It is already giving me that error message. The moment I put in a 9-digit number, that error message goes away. If I was to enter a character that's not a digit, the other validation will kick in. And if I don't provide 9 digits, of course, it's going to handle that as well. So that's how you can add multiple conditions and utilizing the same standard error message variable that is provided from a data card. Now the next case is for the title column, which in this case I have called it asset tag. Whenever an asset is added, it has a tag associated with it. And when the user creates an asset, they have to select the asset type. And let's say I want to create a validation wherein if the asset type is accessory, the asset tag has to begin with the characters AC. If the asset type is laptop, the asset tag has to begin with the letters LT. I have my data card here for title that I have unlocked. And for this card, I have the error message label, which is parent.error. Same scenario as before. I will go ahead and add the coalesce function. And I've gone ahead and plugged in my formula. My formula is the switch function. I'm switching on the combo box control right here, which is the asset type. If that control.selected.value is laptop, then I've gone ahead and checked to see if the title text control, if it does not start with LT, then I'm displaying a message that the asset tag must begin with LT. If the user has picked accessory, then I'm checking to see if the asset tag is not starting with AC. In that case, I'm displaying this error message that says the asset tag must begin with the letters AC. Now, once I've done this, if I go ahead and play this app right now, Notice right now it's not displaying an error message because I've selected laptop and it is LT. But if I was to change this to any other value, let's say I change this to AC, it throws me the error message that says asset tag must begin with LT. And if I was to change this to accessory, I won't get an error message because it is matching the criteria that I have defined in my validations. Now, another case that I would like to add to my asset numbers that the user enters is that the user has to enter something which follows a specific pattern. Now, if you look at the documentation once again around the IsMatch function, it covers a wide variety of patterns that you can leverage straight away. So for example, let's say I want to check to see if the text that the user enters matches a social security number. Here is the formula for it. Just copy this and paste it. That's all you got to do. If you want to check if something matches an email address format, here's the formula for it, right? If something matches a particular sequence, it should have digits, a period, and then a zero or more digits. All of these patterns are defined right here. I can define my own pattern. So let's say my pattern is the first two characters have to be letters and the next four characters have to be numeric. Once again, back to my coalesce function, I will go ahead and add another condition right here. And this is what my new condition looks like. I'm first checking to make sure that the text value in that title column is not blank. And if this value, the text that the user has entered, does not match the pattern that I'm defining. Now, what's my pattern? I want two letters and four digits. And this is all what I have to do. And literally, all I've done is followed the same patterns that are defined right here, but modified it based on my requirements. I want two letters, so I'm matching with a couple of letters first, and then I'm matching it with four digits. Now, if I go ahead and play this, now notice it says the first error message I'm getting is that asset tag must begin with LT. That's because I've selected laptop. Makes sense. So I'm going to change this to laptop. Now, the moment I do this, I get a different error message. It says the first two characters must be alphabets and the next four characters must be digits. So I have to enter digits, right? Once I complete that scenario, only then it is going to go ahead and accept it. If I add another digit to this, or if I don't follow the pattern that's defined, it will immediately throw me that error message right there. Another common use case is around dates. So I have a due date column that's right here wherein the user can go ahead and pick dates. So the date has to be greater than today and less than or equal to 90 days from today. That's my use case. My due date data card. I will unlock this and go to the error message label. So here's the formula that I've plugged in. I'm checking to see firstly if the date is not equal to blank, and then I'm checking to see if the date that the user has entered, if it is less than or equal to today, or if the date is greater than or equal to, I'm using date add, so it will add days to today's date. It's adding 90 days to today's date. So if the date is greater than 90 days from today, or the date is less than or equal to today, then I would like to display that error message, and that's the message that I'm displaying right here. Now, if I play this app, so let's say I pick today's date and say, okay, notice it throws me that error message right away because the date has to be greater than today. If I pick a date in the past, it's going to throw me that same error message. If I pick a date that is within the time span that I have defined, it won't show me that error message. And if I go beyond 90 days from today, it will go ahead and showcase that error message right here. So here's another validation that I just added. I'm checking to see that if the date that the user has entered, there's a function called Weekday, which gives me the day of the week. In my case, I want to start my week from Monday. If the day is greater than 5, that means it's either Saturday or Sunday, then I'm going to display again a message saying that the date must be a weekday. Now, if I play the app right now it's throwing me an error because the date I entered is greater than 90 days from today. So let's say I pick a date in Feb. If I pick the 5th of Feb, which is a Friday, it's not a weekday, it works. And the moment I pick a day that is not a weekday, it's going to throw me that error message right here. Now, one more use case, I have a column called order number, and the user can only enter numbers here. They should not enter decimals. My column here, the order number, is a number type column. Now, of course, in your backend data source, you have options, right? You can say, okay, I don't want any decimal places, or I need decimal places. But what if you want to restrict it right here so it only includes numbers? And this is something that we've already done. If I go back to the error message here in this case, once again, I've plugged in my formula. My formula is if the text that the user has entered is not blank, and if the text does not match the pattern of multiple digits, that means only digits are allowed, I'm going to display my error message which says only numbers are allowed, no decimals. So if I head back right here, the moment I start plugging in my order number, it works fine. If I include a decimal point, there you go. It's going to pick that up and tell me that it's not allowed. So let's say I enter my order number with a decimal. And in my case, my asset is going to be a laptop. I'm going to give it an asset tag. I'm going to fill in all the mandatory fields. Now notice right here, I said only numbers are allowed, no decimals. All the validations that I put in are for my own form control. These are not validations that are added to the backend data source. These are in the Power App itself. I have added the validations right here. Now, the user is still allowed to submit. That may not be the best experience. So what I can do in this case is for every error message label that you have customized. So in my case, I've customized the card order number. All I need to do is just copy the label name, go to the submit button, and let's make sure that the submit button is disabled if there is an error message. So what do I do in this case? So if the error message, in my case, error message 13, which is related to the order number, if that is not blank, that means it has a value, that means there's an error, go ahead and disable the button or keep the button in edit mode. Now, if I play this, notice right now it's disabled the button. That's because the user has to fix the error. The moment I fix the error, the button will come alive. Now I have linked it just to the order number function. For example, the date column, you see, I'm getting the error message, but I'm still allowed to submit because my backend data source technically allows me submitting a date associated with the weekday. So once again, if I would like to block this as well, very simple, just go to the error message, copy the label name. And what I did in this case is added another condition here, which is an OR condition that says whether the error message label for the date control, if it is not blank, then go ahead and disable the button. And notice the button is now disabled until the user enters an accurate date. One final case that I would like to cover is around uniqueness in your data source. So let's say I would like the asset tags to be unique. So in my case right here, I already have asset tags that I am defining. So in my case, I have an asset tag here for laptop Surface Pro X, which is LT2735. So if I go right here and create another record, and let's say I pick asset tag LT2735, I would like to validate whether this asset tag is already existing in the backend data source or not. Now in SharePoint, you can define uniqueness for a column. You can set the properties of the column to be unique, and that's exactly what I've done. So if I actually try and submit this after filling out all the mandatory fields. So if I try and submit this, notice it throws me an error which says that the list item could not be added or updated because duplicate values were found in the field title. That's because I actually made that column a unique column in my data source itself. So if the data source allows you to add those sort of validations, go ahead and do that. Here's another case, purchase price. I'm going to enter a very high purchase price. Notice in the data source itself, I have defined the min value and the max value. So it's clearly telling me that the purchase price value must be between 1 and 5,000. So if you can handle things in your columns in your backend, just go ahead and do that. If not, you can always add the validation logic right here as I showcased throughout this video. So these were all the different types of validation scenarios that I covered as part of this video. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. If you did, then do like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you so much for watching.